As I get older, I'm learning there are certain moments you don't realize are going to turn into memories you keep forever until later. I think we all have those. Like, I remember my first kiss behind the bleachers in middle school, the smell of the grass from the football field, and just how nervous I was. I remember the first time I took a road trip by myself and how crazy it felt to just be on an open road all alone for hours. I look back on those days like an episode of the Wonder Years, Get all misty. I also remember the first time I played Bubsy 3D. And that's a memory I wish I could burn out of my hippocampus with a soldering iron. And the worst part is, I knew it the minute I hit start on the thing. I mean, I had a hunch when I saw the intro play, but I still had hope. Maybe the little cutscene sucks, but the game makes up for it. Then the first level loaded and I heard that voice.
So, you wanna be a video game star?
That's when I knew it was all downhill from here. I knew everyone already hated the game, but I was all doe-eyed and innocent. I still believed there had to be something, some redeeming quality to bring it back from the brink. You understand? I still had hope. What a fool I was. In the interest of fairness and journalistic integrity, let's take a closer look at Bubsy 3D. Maybe there is still some glimmer of something in this game to hold on to. I wouldn't get your hopes up.
Nintendo video games.
Marry me with my money.
Now you're playing with power.
Let me start by saying this. Despite all its flaws, which we will absolutely cover here, I kind of feel bad for the game developers of Bubsy 3D Furbitten Planet. The game was launched in November of '96, and that was a really interesting time for a lot of things. The NES was officially discontinued in the US, and the PlayStation was released to the world. More importantly, when Bubsy 3D came out, it happened right when another really well-known legendary game with strong 3D elements launched. That game was Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 was released in North America only 2 months before Bubsy 3D, and let's be honest, it basically defined the genre. Nintendo intended for Mario 64 to be their killer game, and it definitely was. In the first 3 months in the US, it sold over 2 million copies and grossed $140 million. It was the best-selling video game for the year. And that's not to mention that the first Crash Bandicoot also came out the same month as Mario 64, still 2 months before Bubsy's release date. Crash is also an amazing game in its own right, and nobody could blame the hardware team Bubsy was using. Crash Bandicoot came out on the same PlayStation hardware, and it sold over 6 million copies. The problem is, game developers usually have a good eye on what's coming down the pipe in terms of competition, and Nintendo had been shipping videos of Mario 64 all over the goddamn place well before the launch date. And so here this development team was, making what they thought would be a groundbreaking 3D game, continuing the legacy of their early Bubsy games. Probably really proud of what they were making. But they had this absolute juggernaut breathing down their necks. It was better looking, more fun to play, and there's no way the Bubsy team didn't know it. But intrepid and committed they were, and they finished and launched Bubsy anyhow. And that's something I can never really forgive them for. I mean, this game belonged on the cutting room floor in its entirety. Whether you agree or not, it's widely known as one of the worst video games ever made. Okay, the first Bubsy game was released in May of '93 for the Super Nintendo and later the Sega Genesis. Bubsy in Claws Encounters of the Third Kind wasn't exactly groundbreaking, but it was pretty fun to play, though it did have some frustrating control elements which carried into Bubsy 3D. They went on to make 2 more games with the same general playstyle as the first, very similar to Sonic the Hedgehog, which was Sega's own killer game. Word has it that after the first game, one of the game's lead designers, Michael Berlin, left and wasn't too happy with how Bubsy 2 and 3 did in terms of market share, so when it was time to reboot the series, he was the guy that wanted to test what the PS1 could really do with 3D design. In other words, it was mostly his fault that the game has its incredibly awkward shapes instead of level details, the tank-like movement of Bubsy himself. He was the driving force behind a lot of what makes this game so infuriating. Listen, I still feel bad for the guy given what the competition was, but it seems like he was hell-bent on finishing this project no matter what, and now we're stuck with it. The Bubsy games all center on the theme of the Woolies, an alien race that wants to steal all of Earth's yarn. Bubsy Bobcat, the titular hero in the series, is out to stop them. For Bubsy 3D, we find him captured on the woolly home of planet Rayon, where he's been taken captive, but escapes, and he's on a mission to build a rocket ship and bail out back to Earth ASAP. I admit, it's not much of a plot, but given what it's like to actually play the game, it adds at least something. I mean, without it, Bubsy 3D basically feels like a test of the hardware of the PS1, and it's not really an actual game. Kind of like giving porno a storyline. It never looked good, it's usually stupid and mostly overlooked, but it makes things feel more like a movie than people bumping uglies for 2 hours. Either way, the intro they use to tell this stupid story is way longer than it should be, and it only wraps up with the player's introduction to the voice that I guarantee you'll end up hating by the end, no matter how long you play. Which probably won't be very long. Here's the best part. If you do actually manage to finish this game, and congrats to you if you did that because it nearly killed me, your reward is far, far different than what you're expecting. See, there are rockets all over the game you'll need to collect to get the good ending, which I assumed meant if you didn't get them all, you still win, get a little victory, but the story's better if you do. No, not even close. If you finish all the levels without the rockets, you get an ending where the bad guys, the woolies, win. Sure, you fly off the planet, but you end up stuck in space, probably until you die, and the woolies still invade Earth. Best part is, if you actually do get the rockets, which I didn't because I still love myself at least a little inside, it turns out your ship goes into a time rift, and you end up in the Jurassic period or something, and the bad guys still win. Hopefully that's enough incentive to get you to go out, read a book or something instead of even trying. This is the main problem with Bubsy 3D. I'm not known for putting things delicately, I'm not going to start today. The gameplay in this game is absolutely fucking terrible. To start, moving Bubsy around this polygonal wasteland is basically the same as moving a tank in other games. He builds up momentum, so you regularly run past your goal, plus he only moves in one direction. You control where he's headed like a turret. There are no actual camera controls, and you can really only choose which direction the little jackass runs in. And again, his speed builds up as he goes, and he doesn't exactly stop on a dime, which is especially frustrating when you can't even look down. Another fun thing about the camera angles is the overhead shots. These are useful when you're trying to jump on platforms in the air, especially when you feel like you've lost all depth perception entirely and you're hanging on to reality by a thread anyhow. Which you need to do if you want to finish any of the levels, really. But oh, you sweet summer child, the camera moves only after you jump. So since most of the time you can't see where you're headed before you do, it's a literal leap of faith. And couple that with the fact that touching water kills you, going anywhere near an enemy kills you, and many of the platforms are moving, and you end up praying to God, Vishnu, and whoever else that you land in a right spot about 30 times per level, at a minimum. Oh, and what happens when you die, you ask? Well, there are checkpoints, that little act of mercy is appreciated, but they're spread across the map like swimming pools in the goddamn desert, so even when you get back to one, you probably still have miles to go before you get back to where you were in the first place. And that, my friends, is the extra lovely bit. You pretty much have to guess and explore to figure that part out. You'd think these giant arrows in the sky would be pointing you where you need to go to finish a level, right? You wish. I mean, they point to stuff, sure, but honestly, most of the time they point you to things like secrets, which are just obscured extra sections of the game in pastel-colored wastelands, like I said, and you've been getting lost in them the whole time. Or extra lives, which you're really, really going to want since you're probably going to die a ton of times every level, even if you know where you're going. And spoiler alert, this part came as a little surprise in the shit show of a game, but the music isn't that bad. In fact, it's been in the background of this whole video. The song from the first level, though, it gets pretty annoying. Something about the zither playing the melody or just how happy-go-lucky it is serves to underline how frustrating it is to just get used to playing this game. And because you'll probably spend a ton of time playing that first level, it's gonna get into your head. I'm not talking about just being catchy and getting stuck in there, even if you don't like it. I mean, Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas is a good example of that. No, that first song will just bring back terrible, dark memories of the game every time you hear it. Unless you play it on mute, which I wouldn't say is a bad idea anyhow. The rest of the OST is pretty innocuous, though. It'll mostly blend into the background. Speaking of blending into the background, the graphics in this game are just about 99% background, and they're just terrible. Look, I get that the dev team wanted you to pay more attention to Bubsy than the overall level, but honestly, the way the entire game's designed just feels unfinished. Like you hacked a copy of a game still under construction or got a copy before they were ready to release it. You wouldn't know it to play the game, but they actually meant for each level to have its own unique theme. The problem is, they basically did it with construction paper and a glue stick, because changing colors doesn't make a difference when everything is just some form of a triangle or a square. It's like finding your way in a swimming pool full of tangrams. Also, because the PS1 wasn't exactly designed for this kind of environment, there's often clipping and other issues that make it near impossible to immerse yourself in the level, even if you wanted to. Not that you would, but look, I'm trying here. I don't normally spend time talking about a game's narration. Most games use a narrator sparingly, if at all, and when they do, it's the usual English accent, nothing special to cause your attention to it kind of thing. And it serves to move the game along. That is 100% absolutely positively not the case with Bubsy 3D. In this game, the narrator's supposed to be Bubsy himself, casually breaking the fourth wall by making little jokes about the game and what you need to do in it. But it's goddamn relentless. Seriously, if you go into the audio tracks in the game's original CD, you'll find easily 10 solid minutes of just Bubsy talking, and I'm certain they used every possible second of it.
Oh, look! An arrow! Aren't these game designers wonderful? Giving you a guidepost to help you find your way? How convenient!
If you actually try to beat this game, it's going to take many hours and a lot of level replays. What that means is Bubsy's going to get deep inside your head, and I mean sticking with you long after you stop playing it. Popping up in your subconscious like a cancer, just festering away somewhere in your brain pan. The sad part is the voice actor for Bubsy's an absolute legend in video gaming. I don't know how she got wrapped up into this project, but thank God it didn't end her career. Her name's Lonnie Minella, and she actually has an incredible range. No offense to her, I blame the direction, but she definitely didn't get to use any of that talent in this game. Bubsy's voice makes me want to put my head in a vice like that scene in Casino, and just let someone keep turning it. It's hands down my least favorite part of this game, and I'm confident it's going to be yours too. You know, I feel good knowing we'll have that in common. I no longer care that we couldn't find a single redeeming quality in Bubsy 3D. I'm tired of trying, I'm tired of thinking about this game, I'm sad I played it, and I want those hours back. I'm sad that despite how terrible this game was, they actually kept making Bubsy games afterward. Life is hard enough without knowing this franchise is still sliming its way into people's consoles in free time without penalty. I'm not big on hyperbole, but this game feels like it got away with murder. And it should face a jury of its peers and some time in federal pound-me-in-the-ass prison. I genuinely want justice. I hate it, I knew I'd hate it, I played it anyway, and I also hate it just that much more because of it. You will also hate this game. I strongly recommend you don't play it. That's the end of the video. Just take my advice and leave this game where it belongs, in the deepest, darkest pits of hell.